The world didn't end in fire, but in a sigh of collective relief. We were drowning, choking on the fumes of our own progress, and the architects arrived like a silent, silver rain, washing it all clean. They descended in ships that looked less like machines and more like frozen droplets of mercury, their hulls seamless and impossibly smooth. There was no invasion, no declaration of supremacy. They offered a cure, not a conquest. They called it the Concordance, a gift of biological and neurological synthesis that promised to heal our dying world by healing its most virulent disease, us. In the decade that followed, the skies cleared from a perpetual smoggy gray to a piercing, unfamiliar blue. The acid-scarred forests began to breathe again, and the poisoned oceans slowly shed their chemical sheens. Humanity, in turn, became placid, reasonable, and serene. The architects had identified the source of our planetary ailment not as our technology or our politics, but as the chaotic, unpredictable storm of human emotion, passion. They reasoned with a gentle, irrefutable logic, was the progenitor of greed. Rage was the architect of war. Despair was the engine of nihilism. By integrating with their technology, a subtle lattice of bioregulators woven into our very nervous systems, they promised to mute the static and leave only the clear signal of rational thought. And we, desperate and exhausted, had accepted. We traded our turbulent inner skies for a lifetime of calm weather, and it was, for most, a bargain. I was one of the architects of that bargain. My name is Dr. Eris Thorne, and I once believed the Concordance was mankind's salvation. As a neuroscientist, I saw the beauty in its design, the elegant simplicity of smoothing the jagged peaks and troughs of our emotional landscape. I helped pioneer the early interface protocols, convincing myself and my colleagues that we were not erasing the human soul, but refining it. We were saving the world from our worst impulses. My wife, Alara, was my most fervent believer. She suffered from a rare prion disease that was slowly, cruelly unraveling her mind. The architects offered her a place in the first wave of full integration, a complete cellular reconstruction. They promised a cure where our own science had offered only a slow, managed decline. The procedure was a flawless success. The prions were eradicated, her ravaged neural pathways rebuilt, her body made whole and healthy, frozen in a state of perfect, ageless vitality. She was cured of everything, including her love for me. I visit her every Tuesday in the sterile, white-walled care facility they call a sanctuary. The air inside is cool and smells of ozone and sterility, a scent I once associated with progress and now only with loss. She is always sitting in the atrium, tending to a hydroponic garden of flawless, genetically perfect orchids that have no scent. She looks exactly as she did the day we met, not a line on her face, her auburn hair catching the synthesized sunlight in the same way that once made my heart ache. She looks up when I approach, her eyes, the same deep emerald green, registering my presence with a calm, placid recognition. Eris, she says, her voice a perfect, level melody. It is the designated time for your visit. The F7 model orchid has bloomed. Its efficiency rating is optimal. There is no warmth, no flicker of the woman who once threw her head back when she laughed, who held my hand so tightly in the cinema that my knuckles ached. I show her old photographs, our wedding, a trip to a coastline that no longer exists, the birth of a child we lost before the architects came. She studies them with the detached curiosity of a historian examining artifacts from a forgotten culture. The emotional markers in this image are high, she might observe, pointing to a picture of us laughing. This level of unregulated synaptic firing is a precursor to societal instability. It is good that we have moved past it. She is a beautiful, hollow vessel, a perfect statue carved in the shape of my wife, and my weekly pilgrimage to her side is a self-inflicted punishment, a reminder that in my quest to save the world, I had willingly offered up my own. The world the architects built is one of silent, efficient beauty. There are no traffic jams, no angry shouts in the marketplace, no weeping in the pristine parks. Crime is a statistical anomaly. Art, however, has also become an anomaly. Music is composed by algorithms to promote optimal states of calm productivity. Literature is logical, stripped of messy, emotional conflict. Passion is a relic, a thing to be studied, not felt. We live in a gilded cage of our own choosing, and most people have long forgotten we are even in a cage. But I remember the sharp, exquisite pain of grief, the soaring thrill of discovery, the quiet comfort of unconditional love. These memories are my heresy. For years, I have worked in secret, in a shielded sub-basement laboratory the system has forgotten. A ghost in the machine I helped build. I am not trying to build a weapon to destroy the architects. I am trying to build a key. I call it the Echo Protocol. The concordance doesn't destroy our emotional capacity. That would be too crude, too inefficient. It simply sequesters it, building elegant neurological dams that hold back the flood, allowing only a managed, rational trickle to pass through. My protocol is a viral key designed to dynamite those dams. It's a piece of code that, when activated, should re-engage the limbic system, forcing a hard reboot of the heart. The problem is a matter of resonance. The code needs a catalyst, an external broadcast of such raw, powerful, and unfiltered emotion that it can overwhelm the concordance's dampening field and provide the initial spark. It requires a scream loud enough to wake the sleeping, and the world is about to run out of screamers. Most of humanity lives within the pristine, architect-managed city-states, but beyond their borders, in the toxic wastes, the scarred, irradiated lands, we abandoned pockets of humanity still cling to existence. They are the unvaccinated, the ones who refuse the concordance, choosing the hardship of a broken world over the sterile peace of the new one. The architects call them the unintegrated, the people within the cities. In the rare moments they think of them at all, call them ferals. They are considered little more than savages, living chaotic lives of pain and suffering. The architects, in their infinite, suffocating compassion, have just announced the final integration. A great, silent fleet is being prepared to move into the wastes, not to destroy the ferals, but to rescue them, to bring them into the benevolent fold of the concordance, by force if necessary. It is an act of mercy that is, in reality, an act of extinction. They are coming to silence the last vestiges of the old world, to snuff out the last embers of raw, untamed humanity. For me, it is a death sentence for my work, for my hope of ever seeing the real Ilara again. The ferals are my only hope, the only possible source for the emotional catalyst I need. Their pain, their rage, their fierce, desperate love of their own broken freedom, that is the signal I need to broadcast. Abandoning my life was surprisingly simple. In a world of perfect oversight, The easiest way to disappear is to erase the pattern. I corrupted my own data logs, introduced cascading errors into my public profile, and triggered a sanitization protocol that wiped Eris Thorn from the system as little more than a clerical error. I walked out of my sterile apartment with nothing but a satchel containing the Echo protocol on a shielded drive, a water purifier, and a decade-old topographical map of the ruins of the world. The transition was jarring. One moment I was walking on perfectly clean, self-repairing pavement. The next I was ankle-deep in rust-colored mud at the edge of the wastes. The air itself changed. The cities filtered. Neutral air gave way to a sharp, metallic tang of decay and chemical residue. The silence of the city was replaced by the sound of the wind whistling through skeletal, dead trees, and the crumbling husks of pre-concordance buildings. I was a creature of climate-controlled rooms and logical systems, now adrift in a world governed by chaos. For 3 days, I stumbled through this purgatory, my body aching, my mind reeling from the sensory overload. This was the world we had nearly destroyed, a graveyard of our own making, and yet there was a terrible, vibrant beauty to it. I saw a hawk with mutated, iridescent feathers circling overhead. I saw wildflowers with unnaturally vivid colors pushing their way through cracked asphalt. Life here was not placid or reasonable. It was desperate, ugly, and utterly defiant. It was alive in a way my city was not. On the 4th day, they found me. I had collapsed from dehydration near the rusted skeleton of an old power pylon. My first sensation was the cold, sharp press of steel against my throat. I blinked, my vision swimming, and focused on the face above me. It was a young woman, no older than 30, but her eyes held the ancient, weary vigilance of a survivor. Her face was smudged with grease and dirt. Her dark hair was a tangled, matted mess, and a deep scar cut across one eyebrow. She was thin, wiry, and radiated an intensity that felt like a physical force. Around her stood 3 others, equally ragged, armed with crude, repurposed weapons, a sharpened piece of rebar, a rifle cobbled together for scrap. They looked at me with open, undisguised contempt. They saw my clean clothes, my soft, uncalloused hands, and they saw a creature from another world. "Look what we have here," the woman said, her voice a low, gravelly rasp. It was the first human voice I had heard in 4 days that wasn't a calm, modulated monotone, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. One of the hollows. "Come for a stroll in our garden." She pressed the blade a little harder against my skin. A silent, deadly question. Her eyes burned with a fire I hadn't seen in 10 years. A magnificent, terrifying conflagration of suspicion, anger, and fierce, untamed life. This was it. This was the fire I had been searching for, the storm I needed to unleash. I opened my mouth, my throat dry and cracked, trying to find the words to explain that I had not come to take anything from them, but to give them back the world. All I could manage was a choked whisper. She saw only the fear in my eyes, the weakness of a man who had forgotten how to feel anything but quiet despair. She saw an enemy, and in that moment, I realized that the scream I had come to find might be the last sound I ever heard. The edge of the blade was a line of cold, absolute certainty against my skin. The woman Kal, as I would learn her name, was stared down at me, and in her eyes I saw a reflection of the world she inhabited, sharp, unforgiving, and utterly devoid of pity. My life was a fragile thing, a flickering candle in the gale force of her contempt. My throat worked, but no sound emerged beyond a dry rasp. I was a creature of logic and language, and both had abandoned me. Just as the pressure on my throat increased, a signal of her final, fatal decision, an older man with a face like a dried riverbed and kind, tired eyes stepped forward. "Wait, Kyle," he said, his voice a low rumble. "His pack. Scaver's rules. We take the gear first." Kyle's gaze didn't waver, but she gave a curt nod. The man, Silas, knelt and unceremoniously dumped the contents of my satchel onto the grimy earth. The shielded drive clattered against a rock, a meaningless piece of tech to them. The topographical map fluttered in the chemical wind. But it was the water purifier that made Silas pause. He picked up the sleek, metallic cylinder, turning it over in his calloused hands. "Look at this," he murmured, his voice holding a note of professional appreciation. "Pre-concordance, military grade, still has a charge." He looked from the device to me, a flicker of something other than disgust in his eyes. "Hollows don't carry this kind of gear. They don't need it. Their water is perfect." The blade at my throat eased, just a fraction. It was enough. I found my voice. "A weak and broken thing." "They're coming," I croaked. "A fleet. They call it the final integration. They're coming to save you." The word save came out like a curse. Kyle scoffed. "A harsh, ugly sound. The Hollows don't care about us. We're ghosts to them." "No," I insisted, pushing myself up onto my elbows, the movement sending a wave of dizziness through me. "That's changed. Their system is reaching its final stage, total harmonization. You are the last dissonant note. They are coming to silence you, to make you like them. They will take your children, your memories, your anger. They will give you peace. And it will be the end of you." My words hung in the acrid air. I saw the change in Kale's eyes. Her contempt was still there, a bedrock of hate, but now it was overlaid with the cold, sharp glint of calculation. An enemy you understand is one thing, a threat you didn't know existed is another. She finally withdrew the blade and stood up, towering over me. "Get up." "Hollow," she commanded. "You're coming with us. And if you're lying, I'll find a much slower way for you to die than bleeding out in the dirt." The journey to their settlement was a brutal education. They called it the Rust Warren, and it was a 2-day trek through a landscape that was a testament to humanity's self-destructive genius. We walked through the skeletal remains of petrified forests, their trees blackened and twisted into agonized shapes. We crossed rivers that ran thick and iridescent with chemical sludge, the banks littered with the mutated skeletons of creatures that had tried to drink from them. The air itself was a hazard, and Silas would occasionally call for us to pull the grimy rags we used as filters over our mouths as a toxic, yellow-green fog rolled in. I was a liability, a clumsy academic stumbling through a world I was never meant to see. My soft-soled city shoes were shredded within hours, and my body, accustomed to a life of sterile comfort, screamed in protest. More than once, I fell, and each time, Kyle would glare at me with a look that said she was weighing the benefit of my information against the cost of my weakness. It was Silas who kept me going, sharing his meager supply of nutrient paste and showing me how to wrap my bleeding feet in strips of scavenged leather. During the journey, I watched them, and I began to understand. They moved with a predatory grace, communicating with hand signals and near silent clicks of the tongue. They were a pack, a single organism of survival. One evening, as we huddled for warmth in the rusted-out shell of a transport truck, the attack came. They were called Scrappers, a pack of canid-like creatures, their bodies a horrific patchwork of mangy fur, exposed bone, and crudely integrated scrap metal that seemed to grow from their very flesh. They burst from the shadows with silent, unnerving speed. I froze, my mind unable to process the nightmare before me. But Kyle and her crew did not. In a heartbeat, they formed a defensive circle, moving with a fluid, terrifying violence. Kyle wielded her blade like an extension of her own arm, a whirlwind of precise, deadly arcs. Silas fired his cobbled-together rifle, each shot a deafening roar that sent a scrapper tumbling. In less than a minute, it was over. The ferals stood panting in the sudden silence, their bodies splattered with black, oily blood, surrounded by the twitching corpses of the beasts. Kyle looked over at me, still huddled and useless against the truck wall, and her expression was one I couldn't quite read. It wasn't just contempt anymore. It was something closer to pity. She was seeing what the Concordance had truly done to us. It had taken our teeth. The Rust Warren was not a city. It was a wound that had learned to heal itself. It was built into the collapsed, sprawling carcass of a massive pre-Concordance logistics hub, a chaotic labyrinth of stacked shipping containers, crumbling concrete overpasses, and repurposed machinery. Smoke, thick with the smell of burning wood and roasting meat, curled into the perpetually overcast sky. The entire place thrummed with a chaotic, vibrant energy that was a physical shock to my system. There were people everywhere arguing, laughing, working, singing. Children with dirt-streaked faces chased each other through the metallic canyons, their shrieks of joy, a sound so alien and so beautiful it brought an ache to my chest. Murals were painted on the sides of containers, crude but powerful depictions of hunts and heroes, rendered in paint made from crushed berries and rust. This was not a society of logic and efficiency. It was a glorious, chaotic, desperate mess. It was alive. Kyle led me through the Warren, her presence parting the crowds. The people here looked at me with the same suspicion I'd seen in her eyes, but also with a raw curiosity. I was a ghost from a world they only knew from bitter, half-forgotten stories. They took me to the heart of the settlement, a large, open space at the base of a toppled communications tower that now served as a watchtower. Here, an old woman sat by a fire pit, her face a road map of wrinkles and scars, her eyes a pale, cloudy blue that seemed to see more than the physical world. This was Mara, the elder of the Rust Warren. She was old enough to remember the world before, the chaos and the beauty, the plagues and the passion. She was their memory. Kyle pushed me forward until I stood before her. "He calls himself Eris," Kale said, her voice formal. "He's a hollow. He says the others are coming to wipe us out, to force the Concordance on us all." Mara's gaze settled on me, and it felt like being weighed and measured on a cosmic scale. She did not speak for a long time, simply studying me, her head tilted slightly. Finally, she gestured to the ground. "Sit," she commanded, her voice thin and reedy, but with an underlying strength of steel, "and tell me why a ghost has come back to haunt his own graveyard." I sat, the eyes of a dozen of the Warren's senior hunters and scavers on me, and I told them everything. I started with my own complicity, my belief in the concordance as a cure. I told them about the science of it, the neurological dams that held back the tide of human feeling, and then I told them about Alara. I spoke of her laugh, of the disease that stole her, and of the perfect, beautiful stranger she had become. My voice cracked as I described my weekly visits, the hollow recognition in her eyes, the scentless, perfect orchids. For the first time, I was not a scientist explaining a theory. I was a husband mourning a wife who was still alive. I saw a flicker of something in Cale's stony expression. I saw Silas nod slowly, his tired eyes filled with a deep, weary understanding. I had given them my pain, the one currency they truly understood. Finally, I pulled out the shielded drive. "This is the Echo Protocol," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It is a key. It is designed to break the dams, but it needs a catalyst. It needs a signal, a broadcast of pure, unfiltered emotion so powerful it can overwhelm their dampening fields and wake everyone up. Rage, grief, desperate love. It needs the very things they are coming here to erase." I looked from Mara to Kyle, to all the hard-weathered faces around the fire. "I did not come here to use you," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I came here to ask for your help. I came to borrow your scream so that my world can remember how to feel again." A tense silence fell over the gathering, broken only by the crackle of the fire. It was Kale who broke it, her voice dripping with venom. "You want to use our pain as a weapon," she spat. "The pain you hollows gave us when you abandoned the world and left us to rot. You want to bottle our suffering and shoot it back at your own people. You are a parasite, just like all the rest." She took a step toward me, her hand dropping to the hilt of her knife, but Mara raised a single, frail hand. And Kyle froze. The old woman's clouded eyes were locked on mine. She had seen my truth, the desperate, selfish, and perhaps noble heart of my mission. She saw the man who had lost his wife and the scientist who had damned the world. She held my hope, the hope of billions of sleeping souls, in her wrinkled, trembling hands. The firelight danced across her face as she leaned forward, her expression unreadable, and I held my breath, waiting for her judgment. Mara's ancient eyes, milky with cataracts, seemed to pierce through the layers of my sterile, ordered past, seeing the raw, desperate man cowering beneath. The firelight cast deep shadows across her face, making her expression a mask of inscrutable wisdom. Kyle stood beside her, a statue of coiled animosity, her hand resting on her blade not as a threat, but as a promise. The air was thick with the silent judgment of the Warren's people. "You speak of screams," Mara said at last, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "But a scream is not a weapon. It is a release. It is the sound of a spirit breaking. We have survived not by screaming, but by learning to be silent. We have learned to swallow our pain and turn it into the stone that builds our walls and the steel that edges our blades." She leaned forward, the firelight catching the web of scars on her cheek. "You, Aris Thorn, are a man made of words and ideas. You are soft. You have been sheltered from the truth of this world by the very cage you now wish to break. You ask to wield our fire, but you have never been burned. How can we trust you will not simply let it consume us all for the sake of a ghost in your memory?" Her words were a cold, surgical strike, laying bare the core of their distrust. I was an outsider, a tourist in their suffering. I had no response. She was right. I opened my mouth to argue, to plead, but Kyle cut me off with a sneer. He's a hollow. Mara, he'll break before the first frost. But Mara was not looking at Kyle. Her gaze was still locked on me. Perhaps. The old woman conceded. But even a broken tool can be useful, if you know how it is broken. There is a sickness in the land. Eris. A ghost of your world that has come to haunt ours, to the west. In what was once a valley of communication spires, there is a sound, a hum. A murmur of unease went through the assembled ferals. It started months ago. Mara continued. A low thrumming, just at the edge of hearing. Now, it has grown. It worms its way into your thoughts. Scavers who get too close come back, changed. Their eyes are empty, or they weep without reason, or they fly into rages, striking at their own kin. It is a poison for the soul. The hollows took your feelings. But this thing, this hum, it twists them into weapons that you turn upon yourselves. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Kale will lead a party to the spires. They will find the source of this hum, and they will silence it. You will go with them. A wave of protest erupted from the hunters, and Kale herself spun to face the elder. Mara, he will slow us down. He is a liability we cannot afford. He is the only one who might understand the machine that makes the sound. Mara countered, her voice sharp, cutting through the dissent. She turned her gaze back to me, her expression hard as flint. This is your test, Eris Thorn. You want to see our pain, then you will walk into the heart of it. You want to borrow our scream, then you will first help us silence one that is killing us. Survive this. Help my people. And you will have your catalyst. Fail. And the waste will claim another ghost. The preparations for the journey were a lesson in humility. I was stripped of my city clothes, which were burned for being too clean, and given stiff, ill-fitting armor made from scavenged polymer plates and hardened leather. It was heavy, awkward, and chafed my skin raw. Silas, with a sad shake of his head, taught me how to properly load a pack so the weight was balanced. His rough hands gentle as he adjusted the straps on my shoulders. I was a child learning to walk. Kale's team consisted of 4 others besides herself, Silas, whose quiet wisdom and knowledge of the old paths were invaluable. A massive, silent man named Boar, who carried a huge sledgehammer repurposed from industrial machinery and acted as their muscle, and a pair of young twins, Ren and Lyra, who moved with a ghostly stealth and served as scouts, their eyes constantly scanning the horizon. Kyle's briefing was a model of brutal efficiency. She unrolled a stained, tattered map on a crate, pointing with the tip of her knife. We move fast through the glassed corridor at dawn, she said, her voice sharp and clinical. Boar, you're on point. Ren, Lyra, you'll be on the flanks. Watch for shifters in the ruins. Silas, you and I will be rear guard with the Hollow. The way she said the Hollow made it clear I was not a member of the team, but a piece of cargo they were forced to transport. The hum gets worse the closer we get. It will play tricks on your mind. It will show you things that aren't there. Trust your gut, but verify with your eyes. We communicate with hand signals only once we cross the river. No unnecessary noise. We move. We silence the source. We get out. Any questions? No one spoke. The discipline was absolute. As they dispersed to make their final checks, I stood alone, feeling the familiar sting of uselessness. This was a world of action, of physical competence, and I was a creature of thought, a ghost in a borrowed suit of armor. The glassed corridor was the ruin of a pre-concordance financial district. Some ancient cataclysm had superheated the ground, melting the skyscrapers into grotesque, weeping sculptures of silica and steel. The ground crunched underfoot, a carpet of black, razor-sharp glass. We moved in silence, the only sound our breathing and the endless, eerie whistle of the wind through the skeletal buildings. The twins, Ren and Lyra, flitted through the ruins like wraiths, appearing on ledges and in shattered windows to give silent signals before vanishing again. It was here that I first truly felt the hum. It wasn't a sound so much as a pressure, a low-frequency vibration that resonated deep in my bones, making my teeth ache. It was accompanied by a whisper, a psychic static that scratched at the edges of my consciousness. It was a feeling of profound, objectless sorrow. I saw Silas stumble, his hand going to his head. I saw Boar's knuckles whiten as he gripped his hammer. Kyle alone seemed unaffected, her face a mask of stone. But I saw the tightness in her jaw, the rigid set of her shoulders. That night, huddled in the relative shelter of a collapsed bank vault, the hum was worse. It wove itself into our dreams. I dreamt of Ilara, but she was weeping, her face contorted in a silent scream, her perfect, placid features cracking like porcelain. I woke with a gasp, my heart hammering against my ribs. The phantom image of her agony burned into my mind. I was not the only one. Boar was sitting bolt upright, his massive frame trembling, muttering a name over and over. Silas was staring into the darkness, his face wet with tears. Only Kyle was awake and alert, her knife in her hand, her eyes scanning the shadows. She glanced at me, and for the first time, her expression held not contempt, but a flicker of shared affliction. "It feeds on memory," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the drone. "It finds the cracks in you and pours poison into them." I realized then that her strength was not an absence of feeling, but a mastery of it. She felt the same pain, the same sorrow, but she had built walls of her own. Not of neurological dams, but of pure, unadulterated will. The source of the hum was an old military communications bunker built into the side of a granite mountain. It was a brutalist scar of concrete and rusted steel, half swallowed by the earth. The air here was so thick with the psychic drone that it was hard to breathe. The whispers were louder now, a chorus of despairing voices that spoke of loss and failure. Boar let out a roar of frustration and slammed his hammer into a rock, the sound shockingly loud in the oppressive quiet. "Make it stop," he bellowed, his eyes wild. Kale was at his side in an instant, her hand on his arm, her voice low and firm. "Boar, focus. It's not real. It's just noise." But it felt real. I could feel the tendrils of it trying to find Ilara in my mind, trying to twist my grief into a weapon against me. I closed my eyes, focusing not on the memory of her, but on the science. I tried to analyze the signal, to deconstruct its frequency, its wave patterns. It was a desperate act of intellectual self-defense. "The entrance is sealed," Ren reported, appearing silently from the shadows. "Old world tech, mag locks." All eyes turned to me. This was my purpose, my reason for being here. Kyle's stare was a challenge. "Can you open it?" Hollow, I approached the heavy steel door, my hands trembling. A control panel was set beside it, its screen cracked but faintly glowing. This was my world. This was a language I understood. I knelt, pulling a small diagnostic tool from my pack. The code was ancient, a corrupted mess of security protocols and degraded data. But beneath the chaos, I recognized the structure. The hum fought me, trying to flood my mind with images of failure, of my lab in flames, of Ilara turning away from me in disgust. I gritted my teeth, pushing it all away, focusing only on the lines of code, the flow of logic. It was like trying to solve a complex equation while being screamed at, after what felt like an eternity. I found the override command. With a final, trembling keystroke, I entered it. There was a deep thud, a hiss of depressurizing air, and the massive door slid open a few inches, revealing a corridor of absolute darkness. A wave of intensified psychic energy washed over us, a blast of pure, concentrated misery. Lyra cried out and collapsed, clutching her head. Boar sank to his knees, a low moan escaping his lips. Silas helped Lyra, his own face pale and sweating. Kyle stood her ground, but I could see the immense effort it cost her. She looked at me, her eyes cutting through the haze of pain. "What is it?" she demanded. I stared into the blackness, the whispers now coalescing into distinct, terrified voices. "It's a distress beacon," I said, my own voice shaking with the revelation. "It's not a weapon. It's a recording. It's the last broadcast from this bunker, from the day the world ended. It's the sound of them all dying. We were not being attacked by a machine. We were being haunted by one. And to silence it, we had to walk into the tomb of the people it was trying to save. The blackness in the corridor was a physical entity, a presence that pulsed with the collected agony of a forgotten apocalypse. The wave of psychic grief that washed over us was not an attack. It was an invitation to drown. Lyra was on the ground, curled into a fetal position, her body racked with silent sobs. Boar was on his knees, his great head bowed, his sledgehammer lying useless in the dust beside him as tears carved clean paths through the grime on his face. Kyle stood rigid, her knuckles white where she gripped her knife, her jaw set so tight I thought her teeth might crack. Her famous will was a dam holding back an ocean of sorrow, and I could see the hairline fractures beginning to spread. It was my revelation that had broken their focus. By giving the enemy a name, a ghost, a memory I had inadvertently given it power, transforming it from a mere hostile force into a tragedy they could empathize with. And empathy, in the wastes, was a fatal luxury. "No," I said, my voice cutting through the chorus of whispers in my own head, the sound of my own name on Ilara's dying lips. "Don't listen to them as a whole. Isolate a single voice. Analyze it. It's just data. It's a signal repeating on a loop. It's not real." I was talking as much to myself as to them, clinging to the cold comfort of scientific detachment as the hum tried to find the raw wound of my wife's memory and pry it open. Kyle's head snapped toward me, her eyes blazing with a desperate, furious light. She seized on my words, not as a comfort, but as a command. "He's right," she snarled, her voice a jagged piece of flint. "It's a machine, a broken record. Boar, get up, Lyra. On your feet. That is an order." Her command was a rock in the psychic storm. Boar pushed himself to his feet with a groan, his face a mask of anguish, but his hands found his hammer. Silas helped Lyra up, the young scout's face pale and tear-streaked, but she drew her weapon. They were warriors, and she had reminded them of the war. Silas, you and Boar, take the rear, Kyle commanded, her voice regaining its edge. Ren, Lyra, you're with me on point. Aris, stay directly behind me. And don't touch anything unless I tell you to. We entered the bunker, our flashlights cutting feeble paths through the oppressive darkness. The air was cold and stale, thick with the dust of decades. And the truth of my words was laid bare. This was a tomb. We walked past offices where skeletal figures sat slumped in chairs, their hands still on their keyboards. We saw a mess hall where bodies lay under tables, as if they had simply laid down to die. There were no signs of violence, no struggle. They had just stopped. On the walls, scrawled in what looked like blood, were messages. She's gone. I can't hear the music anymore. Tell my son I'm sorry. It wasn't a plague or a bomb that had killed these people. It was despair. The first wave of the concordance had been a psychic one, a broadcast of serene logic so powerful it had simply snuffed out the wills of those who couldn't adapt. This bunker was the last place that had held out, and this recording was the sound of their final, agonizing surrender. The deeper we went, the more personal the hauntings became. The ambient sorrow began to crystallize, drawing on our own memories to give its ghosts a face. Boar suddenly stopped, staring into an empty barracks. "Mina," he whispered, his voice thick with a grief so profound it was almost tangible. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched. "Is that you, little bird?" Kyle grabbed his arm, her grip like iron. "There's nothing there. Boar." "I see her," he insisted, his eyes wide and unfocused. "She's waiting for me." He tried to pull away, his immense strength fueled by a mad hope. It took both Kale and Silas to hold him back, to drag him away from the phantom of the daughter he'd lost to the wasting sickness years ago. The twins were next. Ren suddenly cried out, pointing his light at his sister. "Lyra, your arm." We all looked. Her arm was fine, but his face was a mask of terror. "It's turning to dust," he stammered. "Just like fathers." The hum was weaponizing their deepest trauma, the memory of watching their fathers succumb to radiation poisoning. They clung to each other, their shared terror a feedback loop that amplified the bunker's psychic poison. I was not immune. The whispers in my own mind began to take on Ilara's voice, not the calm, hollow voice of the sanctuary, but her real voice, the one I kept locked away in the safest vault of my memory. "Iris, it's so cold here," she whispered. The sound so clear, I spun around, expecting to see her. "Why did you leave me? You promised you'd never leave me." The logic I was using as a shield began to crumble. This was a direct assault on my guilt, on the choice I made to let them cure her. We finally reached a set of reinforced blast doors, the source of the hum now a deafening, soul-crushing drone on the other side. A single word was stenciled in faded red paint above the door chorus. This was it. The control panel beside the door was dead, but the doors themselves were slightly ajar, blocked by a tangle of fused metal and debris. "Boar," Kyle said, her voice strained. "Clear a path." Boar, his face a grim landscape of sorrow, nodded. He raised his hammer, not with his usual explosive force, but with a slow, deliberate agony, as if each blow was a penance. He swung, and the sound of the impact was a physical blow. He swung again and again, each strike a roar of defiance against the crushing weight of the hum. As he worked, Kyle turned to me, her face pale in the gloom, her eyes dark pools of controlled pain. "When that door opens, What do we see? The broadcast system, I said, forcing my mind back to the problem. A central transmitter. It will be powered by a geothermal core. That's why it's lasted this long. I have to get to the core command console and initiate a full system shutdown. Can you do it? I think so. But the psychic interference will be at its absolute peak in there. It will show us the worst things imaginable. It will feel more real than anything in this world. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. Then we will know it's a lie, with a final, shattering blow. Bohr broke through the last of the debris. The door groaned open, revealing the source. The room was circular, and in the center was a crystalline structure the size of a man, pulsing with a soft, sorrowful blue light. It was a quantum data core, a piece of technology far beyond anything I had ever seen. Wires and conduits snaked from it, connecting to a ring of holographic projectors around the room. And as we stepped inside, the projectors flickered to life, the room filled with ghosts. They were men, women, and children, their forms translucent, their faces twisted in silent screams. They walked through us, their cold, psychic touch leaving a residue of pure despair. This was the chorus, the final moments of the bunker's inhabitants, recorded and broadcast in an eternal loop of agony. And then I saw her, standing by the central core, separate from the others, was Alara. Not the hollow shell from the sanctuary, but my Alara, wearing the white dress she wore on the day I proposed. She looked at me, her eyes full of the love and fire I thought I had lost forever. "Aris," she said, and her voice was not a whisper in my head, but a clear, resonant sound in the room. "I'm here. I've been waiting for you. This is where we can be together. Shut down their world, my love. Stay here with me." The temptation was a physical thing, a hook in my soul. Every part of me wanted to go to her, to believe the beautiful lie. I saw Kyle falter, her eyes fixed on a small, ghostly boy in the corner who was holding out his arms to her. I saw the faces of her hunters, each lost in their own private hell. The chorus was showing us our heavens to keep us trapped in its hell. I took a step toward Alara, and then another. Her smile was radiant, but as I drew closer, I looked past her. At the pulsing crystal core, I saw the energy patterns, the data streams. This wasn't a complex AI. It wasn't a malevolent entity. It was a promise made by dying people to never let the world forget them. You don't break a promise like that. You fulfill it. I stopped, just out of her reach. I looked at the ghost of my wife, the perfect, beautiful lie, and I let her go. "Goodbye, Alara," I whispered. I turned my back on her and walked to the main console. Her voice called after me, full of pain and betrayal, but I ignored it. I interfaced with the system, my fingers flying across the holographic keypad. I wasn't looking for a shutdown sequence. I was looking for the master broadcast log. I found it. A single endlessly repeating file labeled witness. I didn't delete it. I appended it. I opened a comms channel, rerouting my own neural interface through the system. I composed a single data packet, a message not of code, but of feeling. It was my own grief, my own pain, my own memory of a laughing wife and a dying world. And, with it, I added 2 words. "We remember." I hit transmit. The data packet flowed into the core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the blue light in the crystal flared, turning a brilliant, cleansing white. The holographic ghosts looked up, their faces of agony softening into something like peace. They turned, not to us, but to the light. And then, one by one, they faded away. The hum stopped. The silence that rushed in was so profound, so absolute. It was like a physical blow. It was the sound of a scream that had finally been heard. We stood in the quiet darkness, 5 broken people in a tomb, breathing for the first time without the weight of 1,000 ghosts on our souls. Kyle walked over to me. Her face was unreadable, but the dam of her will had held. "Is it over?" she asked. I nodded, my body trembling with the aftershock of what I had done. From the corridor, we heard a shout. It was Wren's voice, sharp with alarm. "Kyle the Sky." We rushed out of the chorus chamber, back through the tomb of silent bodies, and into the open. We emerged from the bunker, blinking in the harsh light of the setting sun, and we looked up. The sky was filled with them. Dozens of silver Mercury dropships, descending in perfect, silent formation, blotting out the stars as they came. The final integration had arrived. The sky was stolen. One moment, it was a canvas of bruised twilight. The next, it was a ceiling of cold, silent silver. The architect ships descended not with the roar of an invading force, but with the suffocating quiet of a final, unarguable truth. They hung in the air like a judgment, their seamless hulls reflecting the broken world below in a distorted, perfect image. On the ground, the ferals, who had faced down mutants and starvation and the slow poison of the land, were frozen, their hard-won victory in the bunker turning to ash in their mouths. For the first time, I saw true fear in Kale's eyes. It was not the sharp, adrenalized fear of a cornered predator, but the vast, hollow terror of a creature staring into the face of its own extinction. Her hand was on her knife. A useless reflex. Boar lifted his hammer. A gesture of pure, hopeless defiance. This was a battle that could not be won with steel or fury. This was the end of the last dissonant note, and in that moment of absolute despair, an idea bloomed in my mind, born of the bunker's profound silence. The chorus was not just a weapon of despair, it was an amplifier. It took the psychic residue of a handful of dying soldiers and broadcast it with enough force to poison an entire valley for decades. It was designed to transmit a feeling. I had just proved that the signal could be altered, that a new message could be added to the old. The final integration was not just a fleet of ships, it was a network. Every architect, every ship, every single human integrated into the concordance was a node in a single, vast, placid consciousness. They were one mind, serene and logical. And I was standing at the foot of the most powerful psychic broadcast antenna on the planet. Back inside, I yelled, my voice a raw crack in the sudden stillness. Back to the chorus chamber now. Kale spun toward me, her face a mask of confusion and rage. There is no escape. Hollow. We die here. On our feet. We are not going to die. I shot back, grabbing her arm, my touch shockingly intimate after our long journey of distrust. We are going to scream, but this time, the whole world is going to hear it. We plunged back into the tomb. The hum of the descending architect fleet, a physical pressure at our backs. The silence in the chorus chamber was different now. Not empty, but waiting. I ran to the master console, my mind racing faster than it ever had, not with the cool precision of a scientist, but with the desperate, inspired fervor of an artist on the verge of his final, greatest work. "The Echo Protocol," I said, my fingers flying across the holographic interface, pulling the shielded drive from my pack. "It's the key. But the broadcast, the chorus, it needs a source. It needs an emotional signal to amplify." I looked at them, at this small, broken family of survivors. "It needs you." Bohr stared at me, his face grim. "You want us to feel what that machine made us feel. I won't go back to that place." "No," I said, shaking my head as I slammed the drive into its port and began integrating my code with the bunker's ancient, powerful systems. "Don't give it your despair. Give it your defiance. Bohr, give it the memory of your daughter, not of her sickness, but of her laughter. Silas, give it your weariness, but also the love that makes you keep fighting for these people. Ren, Lyra, give it your bond, the strength you draw from each other." I turned to Kyle. Her face was a wall of stone. "And you, Kyle, you have more fire in you than this entire world has left. I don't want your hate. I want your love. The fierce, protective, savage love you have for this broken land and its broken people. That is the catalyst. That is the fire that will burn their perfect, placid world to the ground." She stared at me, her eyes narrowing. She saw the truth of it, the terrible, beautiful logic. This was not a surrender, it was an ascension. She walked to the center of the room, to the spot where the pulsing core had faded, and closed her eyes. The others, trusting her where they did not yet trust me, followed suit, forming a small, ragged circle. "It is not enough," I whispered, the final lines of code locking into place. "It needs my voice, too." I closed my eyes and did not think of the hollow woman in the sanctuary. I thought of Alara. I gave the machine the memory of her hand in mine on a windswept beach, the taste of salt on her lips. I gave it the sound of her humming off key in our kitchen, the warmth of her head on my chest in the quiet hours before dawn. I did not give it my grief for her loss. I gave it my gratitude for her life. And then I opened the channel. The console before me lit up, no longer blue or white, but a swirling, chaotic vortex of color, a visual representation of the raw, untamed spectrum of human emotion. From the center of the room, a low hum began, not of sorrow, but of power. Kale gritted her teeth, a single tear escaping from beneath her closed eyelid, a testament to the storm she was unleashing within herself. I slammed my hand down on the broadcast command. The effect was instantaneous. A wave of pure, unadulterated feeling erupted from the bunker, silent and invisible, but more powerful than any explosion. It was the righteous fury of Kale, the steadfast love of Silas, the defiant grief of Bohr, the unbreakable bond of the twins, and the enduring love of a lonely scientist. It was the taste of a first kiss and the agony of a final goodbye. It was the joy of a child's laughter and the rage of a parent's loss. It was the messy, contradictory, illogical, and magnificent truth of what it meant to be human. It slammed into the Architect network not as a weapon, but as a paradox they could not compute. We felt the change in the world. The low thrumming of the ships overhead faltered. It did not stop, but it became erratic, like a perfect rhythm stumbling into arrhythmia. Then, across the planet, the dams broke. In the sterile, silent cities, A billion sleeping souls began to stir. A man in a perfectly ordered plaza suddenly stopped, a forgotten memory of his childhood dog bringing a tear to his eye. A woman tending to her scentless orchids felt a phantom ache in her chest, the ghost of a long-buried heartbreak. The concordance was not a prison of steel, but of placid consensus. Our broadcast was a mutiny of the heart. The ships did not fall from the sky. They simply drifted. Their perfect formation broke as their unified consciousness fractured into a billion points of confused, nascent individuality. Some ascended, fleeing back into the silent void. Others descended, landing heavily and clumsily in the wastes, their hatches remaining sealed, their inner workings paralyzed by the psychic virus of a feeling they could not name. And in a white-walled sanctuary a world away, a woman with auburn hair who had been staring at a perfect orchid for 10 years blinked. A single, crystalline tear traced a path down her cheek. She looked at her hands, turning them over as if seeing them for the first time. A memory, faint as a distant star, flickered in her mind of a man's hand holding hers, of a promise whispered against her skin. She looked up, her emerald eyes filled not with placid recognition, but with a question. Months later, the world was a beautiful mess. The cities were chaotic, filled with the noise of people learning to live and feel again. There was conflict and pain, but there was also music and art and laughter that was sharp and real. The architects were gone, their ships now monuments to a failed perfection, scavenged for parts by humans and ferals working side by side. The line between the two worlds was blurring. I stood with Kyle on a ridge overlooking the Rust Warren, which was now expanding, its chaotic energy a beacon in the new world. She was no longer just a warrior. She was a leader, a builder. Her fire had not been extinguished. It now provided warmth. "You never told me if you found what you were looking for," she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. "I found more," I replied, my gaze distant, on the horizon. I had gone back to the sanctuary. I had found Ilara. The woman I met was not the wife I had lost, nor the hollow shell I had visited. She was someone new, a person piecing herself together from the fragments of a life she was just beginning to remember. Our love was not a thing that could be simply rebooted. It had to be regrown, cultivated in the new, wild soil of this reclaimed world. It was a slow, painful, and hopeful process. "The scream you borrowed," Kyle said, a rare, small smile touching her lips. "Was it loud enough?" I looked at her, at the strength and resilience etched into her face, at the vibrant, noisy, imperfect world spreading out before us. "Yes," I said. "It was loud enough to wake the dead." And, together, we turned from the past and began the long, difficult work of building a future worthy of the sound.